If you finally made it to the modern age of Civ 7 and are trying to find the best Civ to play, well, you're in the right place. Hey everyone, this is Connor at Civ Haus, and I'm here today to finally give my Modern Age Civ rankings. Been working on this one for a little bit, trying to kind of iron out the kinks of this list and get a list together that I'm really happy with. I also took the notes from the Exploration Age and Antiquity Age videos, so in particular in this one, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the civic trees. Honestly, I've had them open for all those other videos, but I didn't speak to them maybe specifically enough, and so I'll do that a lot more here. However, before I get into the list, really exciting couple of announcements. Number one, we reached 1,000 subscribers, so thank you all so much for helping us to get to that major milestone. And to celebrate, we are actually going to be giving away a copy of Civ 7 on Steam. So if you, and this would be specifically, like I said, a Steam key, so you'd have to have Steam to play the game, but if you are someone who has watched our videos and doesn't have it, or maybe has a friend who you'd like to gift it to, we will be giving a copy away, and we are going to be doing so on a live stream next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central. So I think that's 3 p.m. Eastern. We've got the info on the channel there. In order to be eligible for the giveaway, though, you're going to have to be a member, which we have also just launched today. So a lot of exciting stuff here at Civ Haus, more ways for you all to get involved. We're going to have some fun perks for members, a Discord coming out soon, so just stay tuned for all of that. But anyway, let's get right into the rankings here. And how we're going to do this, if you've not watched these videos before, I'm just going to kind of go 12 to 1 and go through each of the Civ rankings here, talk about each one, what I think are the kind of clear pros and cons, and what you should be aware of if you're going to play these Civs. So number 1 is going to be, or number 12 rather, is actually going to be, drumroll please, Siam. All right, so this one is tough. I think with this Civ, you are put into a tough position because city-states are, in my opinion, just really hard to plan around in the modern age. There's not a lot of tiles for them to occupy. Sometimes you don't even get ones that spawn near you. And then when you do, it's very easy for another, an AI to just kind of run them over, or for you to honestly just lose out on getting them as a suzerain. So, I should have kind of clarified this as well, but this is obviously a ranking for, deity, immortal, high-level play, not multiplayer. And so I think, however, Siam would be even worse in a multiplayer lobby, to be honest. So I'll kind of look really quick here at some clear pros and cons for Siam. I think there are moments where city-state bonuses can be good. This diplomatic action can allow you to immediately become a suzerain. I think that can provide you some value. However, again, it's just really tough to get that to reliably work. I think this this wonder here, I'm not going to try and pronounce it. This wonder, though, the benefits, I think it's arguably one of the worst in the game. You get an influence based, you get increased culture and gold for each city-state that you're a suzerain of. It has to be on a rough tile. So, again, all of this is just so situational. And then you kind of throw in a, unique ranged unit that I don't think moves the needle much for me. This unique improvement does not move the tile much for me, not move the needle much for me, rather. There are some strong things in the civic tree, though, to mention that. In particular, related to if you have good relationships with other civs. If you're friendly with a lot of other civs, you can get a lot of benefit for that. The problem is you're getting influence, which there's nothing wrong with influence in the modern age necessarily, but again, the way you're using influence with this civ is probably towards city-states, which again, I just don't think is that good overall. So this one, it's kind of a double-edged, or kind of a two-pronged problem, rather, where I feel like this civ, its basis is not only just not good because I think city-state relationships are bad in the modern age, it also just doesn't have a lot going for it in terms of just its raw setup. Civic trees are the same way. I don't mind pulling this over here to show you all the civic trees as well. This is kind of what it's giving you. And again, there's just not much here that moves the needle for me personally. So Siam is going to come in at number 12 for me on this list. And also, by the way, I'll put a tier list up at the end on screen so you can kind of see how I have them tiered. The Modern Age for me is a pretty interesting one when it comes to tiers. So, number 11, as I'm hovering right here, is going to be Nepal, the newer Civ that was added. This one's tough as well. I think the civic tree can be very good on this one. There's a lot of benefits if you are in the mountains. And I think that's kind of the whole, the whole gimmick of Nepal is if you are in the mountains and you have a really good seed for that, maybe you've used Pachacuti and the Incans, maybe you've had some kind of mountain synergies that can be good. However, without that, it really is hard to justify any kind of ranking for Nepal. I rank them higher than Siam just because of their ceiling can be somewhat high, but in any case, I think that this is a good Civ, good, emphasis on good, not great, for culture. If you're in that mountain zone, I think there are just so many other better Civs for culture in the Modern Age in particular. I think there are a few really strong standout cultural Civs, so that also makes this a little bit tough. I really want the Sherpa to be a good unit. It's so cool. Just this idea of you have this unique scout going into the mountains and creating these unique buildings right here. Really neat idea, because then you're getting a lot of value out of mountains. Not only are they defensive fortresses for you in terms of blocking enemies out, they also are giving you production and culture, which is really nice. Again, potentially. Otherwise, though, I don't think there's a lot here that not only is good, but goes along with kind of the meta of the game. The Civic Tree really wants you to play a little bit of a taller style. You get benefits in one portion of it, I'd have to look at specifically which, where you get benefits for having less settlements than other Civs. And there's just not a lot else here. I mean, the Associated Wonder, this wonder here, Bood Hanath, I probably butchered that. It's nice because it increases your relationship with all leaders. It's an influence base. Has to go on a tropical tile adjacent to a mountain tile, so really specific requirements there to get it down. If you do get it down and your relationship can go up with everyone, you can get some benefits from that. However, again, there's just not much here for Nepal that screams any kind of value to me, so they are going to fall at number 11 on my list. Next up is going to be another Civ. This is kind of not to go ahead of the and preview the tier list at all, but this kind of rounds out the bottom tier for me, and that is going to be Russia. A lot of the same idea here, where I feel like there are just way better options for culture in this age, even though that is kind of a lot of the focus of Russia. Let's kind of look at what they offer here. I think this rocket launcher, anything with the splash ability, I think is at least always something to consider because of the frequency of units being bunched up, I think is always valuable. The unique cavalry unit, +4 combat strength in friendly territory. That's great. Anytime you're dealing with combat strength in friendly territory, though, I do tend to inch away from that, because then you're, I don't know, that's an extra layer of requirements that a lot of times isn't met when you're fighting, which just can feel bad. Its civic abilities are nice, though. You get culture on districts and cities, you get science on districts and cities and tundra, and you get obviously the Hermitage there, which I don't think Hermitage is okay. Again, a lot of this Civ, and getting into its civic tree as well, requires you to be in the tundra. You get a lot of value when you are in the tundra, but not much when you're outside of it. Looking at the civic tree, you get increased food on farms and towns, you get production on farms and towns and tundra tiles. You get increased production and decreased growth in cities, which I think is actually pretty good. That's that emancipation reform. I can go ahead and just pull this over, actually, while we're looking at it here. Increased science, decreased culture in cities. Let's see, increased total culture for every city, increased further city centers on a tundra tile. Yeah, just a lot of focus on tundra tiles here, where I just don't think when you have... if you're looking at an elite civ in this era, and I've rated this kind of the same idea similarly across all the ages, where I feel like having an angle that you are particularly dominant in is nice, but you need to have some layer of adaptability in order to win in a certain age. The idea being here, though, if you're playing Russia in the modern age, you're going for culture or science, period. At least as far as I understand it. However, I just feel like there are better options for both in this age. So if that is kind of the aim of Russia, unless you're just in a really tundra-heavy seed, I just don't see how you would pick this civ over some others. So for me, I've got it at 10. Again, not to preview the tier list too much, but it is kind of the last one I have in that bottom tier. So for me, we move up a slight step here when we look at this next one. And that is going to be Buganda. All right, I have tried to play Buganda a little bit. See, I have them at number 9, by the way, but I think this one has a lot of potential if you are able to be pillaging constantly. So I think that is where the value is in Buganda, is if you're constantly able to pillage, and even better if you're surrounded by lakes. If you can do those two things, if you have a lot of lakes around you, and you're able to pillage a lot, you are able to get a lot of value out of this civ. If not, though, if you are having trouble staying alive through the pillaging process, or you're not near any lakes, for example, it really does feel like this one falls off a good bit. I also think it's funny a little bit. I know you get culture from pillaging, but I don't know. This one feels way more militaristic, and I guess the idea is you kind of pillage and get out, which is fair. You're healing, so you have some sustain there. This commander, for what it's worth, I do think is very strong. Like, there is a lot of synergy here. If you can do what this civ is trying to do, I think it's just very difficult for you to do that. In the civic tree, you have some benefits on one of your nodes from, you get increased pillaging yields and healing. Pillaging grants experience to friendly commander units when within their command radius. You get some benefits for being near lakes, navigable rivers, things like that. And one of the traditions is especially interesting: increased happiness in settlements for every other nearby settlement within a set number of tiles. So I deal with that one being that you're going to pillage an enemy settlement, then eventually claim it, and then get benefits for being near other settlements, is kind of how I understand the strategy of that one. I think the wonder that you get, this Muzibu Asala Mpanga, I probably pronounced that wrong. I think it's probably the worst wonder in the game. Maybe not in the game, maybe at least in the age. It gives you, as a food base, increased food on all lake tiles, increased culture and happiness on lake tiles in the city, must be built adjacent to a lake. Obviously this is, the wonders and kind of the extra production towards them, I try to never value too highly, because they are kind of supplemental to the overall civ. But this is a factor. I mean, this is something that is a part of this civ's kind of picture. It's an advantage that you get that is essentially, in my mind, useless. So that's a bit of a hit against them. Yeah, this unique building to Kabaka's Lake, it just doesn't feel great. So overall, I feel like Buganda is pretty solidly at number 9. That being said, really high ceiling in the correct seed, and especially if you're able to just go around and pillage and come back, I think it can be very, very good. Let's move on to number 8, and that is going to be Prussia. Okay, so Prussia is, in my mind, I put Prussia next to Buganda for a reason. I think you're playing both somewhat similarly, where you're going to be enemies with a lot of people a lot of the time. This one, though, I think is I think there's a slight edge here. I mean, obviously, you're going for culture here. That's probably your actual win condition, while kind of doing military things. This just feels like a more pure, kind of correct iteration of what a military civ would look like. And this +1 combat strength for every unfriendly or war civ relationship, this is really good, potentially, but is going to be very hard to maintain throughout the age. But if you can maintain it, you have that, along with a Brandenburg Gate Civ that can feel very good. It prevents war weariness in the settlement that it's built, or the happiness effect on it, rather. Problem is, with this, it only affects the one settlement that it's in, so you'd probably build it your capital, and then you'd use resources in other cities to keep happiness up, or something like that. Your units can hit very hard. This having extra movement plus combat strength for movement remaining is very good. Combat strength against land units at a +3 is very strong. This unique railroad doesn't move the needle a ton for me, but as a just purely hard-hitting civ, this one does feel pretty good. Just, again, not quite as good as some others. And I think that the two biggest knocks that I would say are that it's a very singular kind of playstyle. You just have to be very constantly annoying, using your influence for sanctions, fighting constantly, which means all that negative energy is going to come back to you as well. And so it's a hard playstyle, and it's not a very adaptable one. So that's where I feel like this civ kind of falls in the rankings for me. If you are going pure militaristic, I don't know that I have a lot of other militaristic civs much higher than this. I'm trying to kind of think of what the other ones left, what their strongest angle are. So if you are just dead set on military, Prussia could be the option for you. Last thing, though, on this is your civic tree. There is a pretty cool civic tree node in this. It's in the Zollverein. It's the tier 1. You can establish and keep trade routes with cities you're at war with, and gives you an increased settlement limit. Things like that are nice. There's one where you get increased relationship change from diplomatic actions, so it helps your sanctions to hit a little bit harder. That's probably the main angle you'd be using them for. But even if you can have trade routes with cities you're at war with, they can still be pillaged and plundered. So there's just, again, I think there's a lot of opportunity for Prussia to be good in a purely, military, especially if you have the ability to snowball a little bit with some units coming in. But in general, I think I have Prussia just naturally a little bit lower than some others. But still, one that I think is interesting at the very least for folks to try out if they haven't. If you haven't done a run as Prussia, just an all-military Modern Age, it is a lot of fun. It's just very hard to maintain. Number 7 is going to be Mughal, India. This one is super interesting. I mean, Paradise of Nations is one of the craziest, in my mind, abilities in the game. I mean, plus 75% gold yields, plus minus 25% to all the other yields is fascinating. Really is fascinating to use. And a lot of your civic tree is going to give you the ability to even further use that. Increase gold towards purchasing infantry units. You have, what else is there? You can, maybe the craziest part of their civic tree is the Gardens of Paradise tier 1. Wonders can be purchased with gold. And then there's a tradition that comes along with that, reduced gold price when purchasing anything. I mean, this as a pure gold-oriented, civ is really, really fascinating. And Red Fort honestly fits in pretty nicely with that as well. It gives you gold, and it adds a district with walls that has to be conquered. Increased HP to this tile and all city centers. There's a lot here that's interesting to me. Really, really is. And gold, the beauty about gold and Civ is it allows you inherently to be somewhat adaptable because you can choose what you're buying. You don't have to purchase things that just fit along the economic path. You can purchase science buildings, culture buildings, etc. You can purchase units. You can purchase wonders. You can kind of do everything with this Civ. So it made sense for me to put this Civ right in the middle because it is so adaptable. So adaptable. However, this minus 25 to all other yields really is something that I think people should pay attention to with this. Because yes, you're going to be purchasing everything, but you can't purchase tech tree updates. You can't purchase civic tree updates. You can purchase the buildings that help you with them. But even if you do purchase a culture building, it's not going to give you as much as it otherwise would. So if you're going to play Mughal here, I really would say to go all out economy. Purchase gold buildings and just try and go absolutely bonkers with gold. Go for the economic win condition and kind of have that be your primary angle. The Stepwell, the units really don't move the needle much for me. I mean, that's the other reason the Civ's a little bit lower is like from here down, and even some aspects of the civic tree just really aren't that exciting. Even Red Fort is just a decent wonder in my mind. But there's a lot in the civic tree that I do like. You know, the purchasing of wonders is absolutely crazy. So in general, if you're looking for, you know, this and Prussia really are two incredibly unique play styles and are very interesting to play. So at the very least, if you've never done a Modern Age with the Mughal, I recommend just doing it simply for the experience of seeing how high you can get your gold yield. Truly is kind of a crazy Civ ability. But in any case, they are going to come in at number 7 for us on this list. If you haven't already, we're about halfway through the list now. Like and subscribe. I feel like I'm obliged to plug that every time. But do it. It does help us a lot. I mean, we got to 1,000 members. Cannot believe it still. Anyway, let's move on to number 6. And this is another very kind of siloed style for me, in a sense. Because I think that you are going to inevitably go for happiness when you play the French. So much of your benefits are coming from using, getting into as many celebrations as you can, and letting that be a huge part of how you play. This is a militaristic civ, though, so that's something that, even though, I don't know, it feels to me like it really isn't militaristic diplomatic. Maybe it's militaristic cultural, or should be. But in any case, this celebration effects of any government type is, I feel like, a little bit more gimmicky than it is strong, but it does allow you to be super, super adaptable, which I always value to a degree. The Jacobin has a lot of, in my mind, just kind of all over the place benefits, so it really is kind of a net neutral for me. I'm usually always going to rate civs with unique quarters a little bit higher, though. I just think the benefit of having that and going into the civic tree with it is really good. And the civic tree, while we're talking about it, a lot of things that increase happiness, in particular with wonders and military buildings. And it gives you some kind of benefits for leaning in more to the military side of this. So I guess the question, for the French Empire is, if you compare it to Buganda, which would you rather play? Both are, in my mind, cultural military options. I think the French Empire gives you a lot more personally, but I could see someone potentially making the case for either. Again, I don't know. I just think there's a lot more the French Empire gives you. I think this unit's pretty good. The Guard Imperial. Ranged attack, +2 combat strength within a friendly army commander radius. It is more expensive to train, but I think having an infantry unit that can make a range attack with +2 combat strength is just so much value. Really is just, in my mind, one of the most value-packed units in the Modern Age, especially from the military side. Yep, happiness, happiness, happiness. Just a lot of celebrations coming through here. The Eiffel Tower is the associated wonder here. It is a culture base, but increased culture and happiness on districts in the city. So again, I can't believe they call this militaristic diplomatic. It really should be militaristic cultural in my mind. I just don't understand why it's not. In any case, civic tree. There's a really interesting one here. Increased culture for every policy slotted into the government, which you're going to get a lot more of if you are entering into celebrations more. So if you can go really all in on happiness, I really do think this one is a pretty interesting one to do. But there's other benefits where you get upgrades to commanders. You get, if you defeat an enemy unit, gain culture equal to a percentage of its combat strength. So, again, I've said it so many times, like I'm saying it again, though. Think of the French as a cultural militaristic civ, and you'll have a lot better of a chance. If that's kind of your angle, I think it's a decent option. I still think there are better cultural options, though. But if you're looking for some solid military and some balance, I do think the French is a pretty good civ in the age. All right, let's move on to another one. This is another newer civ expansion, part of the World Collection DLC Crossroads of the World Collection DLC, at least. That is Great Britain. Great Britain, let's talk about Civic Tree first. So there's a lot in the Civic Tree about resources. Or resources and great works, rather. So if you have resources, so like one of the traditions, for example, proceedings, cities with both a great work and a resource slotted receive increased culture and science. That's pretty good, and that's not that hard to do. You get resource capacity increases, you get gold in towns, a lot of benefits here to playing Great Britain. I think looking at the Civ ability first here, or next rather, is interesting. Plus 25% gold towards purchasing buildings and 25% production towards constructing buildings, but it costs doubly more to convert your towns into cities. So if you can maintain cities coming in from previous ages, Great Britain can feel flawless to play. It can feel really, really easy to play. But if you can't, you're going to run into problems because you need to get away from towns, especially in the modern age. So this one's a bit of feast or famine. It's funny, part of me, sometimes I put these lists together, then when I go to talk about them, I'm like, man, I could rate this a little lower. Part of me wants to move Great Britain down retroactively. I'm not going to. Keep them at 5, but in any case, know that I'm already backtracking on this a little bit in my mind. But one thing I will say I do like about this is I really do like this antiquarian? I don't know. This unique explorer, plus 5 culture for every tile from your capital when you use excavate artifact. That's kind of crazy. Plus 5 culture for every tile from your capital when you use this ability, when you get an artifact. That is a culture bomb if you're able to get it, which seems very, very strong. I mean, this, if you're able to get it, the big if is very strong. And that's kind of the whole idea of Great Britain in my mind is if you can check a few things, this can be incredibly strong. And I also feel like it's very adaptable. You can really go for any victory condition with Great Britain and not be, overly checked out. Not overly, you're not going to be pigeonholed at all here. This naval unit's also very strong. We've got a nice unique quarter as well. Gives you gold production, 2 great things to have in the modern age. The Battersea Power Station here is really nice. It gives you production flat. But also when you're training a naval unit, you can receive an additional naval unit of the same type. So you can just spam this revenge unit and has a nice splash to it as well. So there's just, again, if you're in a certain situation, I think Great Britain can be the best civ in the modern age. If you're in a navy-heavy thing, you're able to explore, you already have your cities, you should just absolutely roll with Great Britain in the modern age. Now, if you don't check those boxes, you can be in a little bit of a tough spot. So that's my caveat with Great Britain. I think it's a highly adaptable civ, and can be unstoppable in the right situation, but it needs to be in the right situation. I put this at 5. Maybe realistically, I put it a little bit lower in hindsight, but I do think for what it's worth, at least, this kind of is, and this is the case of my tier list too, which makes sense. This is I feel like the remaining civs, the top 4, are in my mind a very clear top 4. So this is kind of what I would say is the last cutoff for what I would say are average to mediocre civs below it. Because before I move on, I do think there are a lot of really kind of bad civs in the modern age. Some of the ones we've talked about, especially those bottom 4, I really don't feel like are very good. But the top 4, I feel like are incredibly good. So let's get right into them here with number 4. And that's going to be Qing, China, which I have mispronounced this 100 times in this channel, and I've heard you all in the comments, so I hope I'm doing it correctly there. I've said King tons of times, but I think it's Qing. Ton to love here, I think. I think this is an incredibly unique civ, one that I have played before and really enjoyed playing, and can feel just so strong. Let's take a look at the ability first, because I think it's one of the most standout parts. Gold culture influence, but at a cost of -1 science from imported resources. You take the penalty all day. It's a net 1, net, I guess, 8 + 8 for imported resources. I mean, that's a crazy benefit, right? And you can make up for it if you're building enough of the unique quarters, which give you +6 science for one part of them. Unbelievable. Plus 25% influence once you have it completed. Gold coming in as well. And the Chengdi Mountain Resort is pretty good. Gives you gold, increased culture for every other civilization with which you have a trade route, which you're going to be doing. So, ton of reason to not only play this civ, use every aspect of it, but also to invest in the civic tree to get the quicker access to this wonder. I really feel like, and I hope people can see this right away, I feel like this civ is where things really take a turn in the modern age, where you can start to see some really strong abilities coming through. It's almost been hard for me to get excited about the rest, because I just know that these top 4 are so strong. Let's look at the civic tree, though, some aspects that it brings. So increased combat strength for all units, for every other leader, with which you have a trade route. Very good. Increased growth rate in towns with a resource assigned to them, which you're going to probably have. You have one that gives you a tradition with increased trade income. You have one that gives you, let's see, production towards land units is just okay. Combat strength for land units is just okay. Happiness from resources assigned to cities. Just, again, a lot of things to like about this. Not only that, you have it all with a unique merchant, too. The Gusa is probably the weakest part of it. I mean, +4 is a nice bump, and you're going to probably have them next to each other. But I would think of this mostly as a defensive measure, because the way, in my mind, you play this is all-out trade. All-out trade. Find a way to supplement the science that you're going to take from the hits. Spam this merchant. Absolutely spam the merchant. And then just go for a lot of different win conditions, honestly. You can really win a lot of different ways. Economic expansionist is a bit misleading. I think that the sky is kind of the limit for the Qing, for how you can win with the Civ. So if you're looking for an adaptable, trade-heavy, kind of snowball-y playstyle that I think is very, very good and very rewarding, I think you cannot go wrong with the Qing in the modern age. Absolutely an A-tier, potentially S-tier Civ. Let's look now. We're in our top 3. Getting close to the finish line here, folks. Appreciate you sticking with me if you have thus far. Let's look at number 3. And that's going to be Mexico. I really like Mexico. I probably have them rated a little bit higher than some others. And that's because I really like this, their Civ ability. It has 1 celebration effect plus 30% culture for 10 turns. And you know what? It doesn't matter if you can't do anything else, because that's all you're doing is Mexico. It is the best cultural civ in the age, and honestly, for me, just the existence of Mexico is reason enough to rate a lot of the other cultural civs lower. Because if you're gonna go for culture and you have the option to choose Mexico, I really don't know how you could justify going with a lot of other civs. I mean, this is insane. You get 10 culture for the unique quarter, 5 on each of the aspects of it. +2 culture for every tradition slotted into the government. Emphasis to go for the impetus rather to go for the civic tree and to unlock those traditions and use past traditions. Who cares about this infantry unit? Not that important. The Revolucionario has some things that are good, some things that aren't. Like, some of them are buffs to your commanders and different things like that. A lot of them are that, actually. So maybe this is a little bit of a knock against Mexico. And that probably is, like, now that I'm talking about it, is probably the biggest knock against Mexico, is that the military side of this kind of feels out of place a little bit. That there's so much emphasis on military stuff. But even the wonder here, the Palacio de Bellas Artes, is a cultural base, increase happiness on great works, increase happiness in the city, has some great work slots, etc. If you are, again, I'll say it again, if you're playing Mexico, you should absolutely be going for the cultural win, and I think that it's probably the most fun Modern Age Civ when it comes to culture. Part of me wants to put them at number 1. The only reason I don't, because I think it's clear that they're not, is if you are put in a position where you're behind on culture, or you're just not going to win and you need to pivot, like you have a really scientifically set empire coming into this or something, this could be just completely irrelevant for you. And then you're kind of forced to maybe try and use the military side of it, which feels pretty weak. And yeah, I don't know. But overall, Mexico feels so strong. And I haven't even talked about the civic tree yet, because the civic tree adds things to your celebration year that's already very good. It gives you production towards military units. There's another aspect of it that gives you influence towards initiating diplomatic actions. There's another one that gives you science. So, again, this is just wild. Now, I will say, there's nothing in the Civ to give you happiness, and you really need happiness to get the Revolucion going. I guess there's one tradition that gives you increased happiness and settlements for every tradition slotted into the government. So I guess that is a way to get some happiness right there. That's in the Plinus Politicos civic tree. It's the tradition you get from it. That is definitely worth getting, because you're going to need happiness in this age to really get the value out of Mexico. Ideally, you're coming in and out of celebrations all the time. So, all in all, I'll quit yapping about Mexico, but I really do like it. I think it's incredibly strong, and I think you would, be remiss not to play Mexico at least once. Now we have, I think, a lot of these next two are kind of community consensus, 1 and 2, America and Meiji. I have America at number 2. So I think Meiji Japan, we'll get to in a second, just seems kind of like it is very, very set as the best Civ, but I think America has a lot to like as well. Especially if you have resources. Now, this is kind of the one contingency with America, is there's a lot of benefits to having resources. And I mean, this Prospector works towards that. There's a lot that kind of helps you to do that. But 100 gold every time you improve one, and there's a lot of other kind of benefits in the civic tree towards this as well. Increased gold for every assigned resource, increased influence for every assigned resource. There's some benefits for like trade route, production on resources, etc., things like that. So you have to have resources. But if you do, America can feel really steamrolly. The unique units otherwise do feel a little bit lacking. Like the Marine doesn't feel great. The Prospector I've tried to use before, and it's a little bit gimmicky, a little bit situational. I mean, you basically just need a resource right outside your borders to get any kind of value out of it. If not, It's just kind of there. The industrial park is important because of the number of resources it can give you, increasing it by 2. You need a lot of resources here, so this helps you to get more, so that just feels good. The Statue of Liberty is not a great resource in my mind. Gives you a happiness base. The biggest part of it is the migrants it spawns. So I think it spawns 4, which give you growth events, but yeah, America overall, though, I'm not talking as excitedly about it because it just feels like it's this just kind of anchor. It's very reliable. You can play any playstyle. It's extremely adaptable. Your gold can scale really highly to kind of push you in any direction. But the biggest reason to play America is if you get into the modern age and you don't know what you're going to do, and you have America as an option, and you have some resources, I don't think there's a reason to pick any other Civ. I think it's just probably far and away the most adaptable in the age. There's not a lot of really bad parts to it. I guess the Marine and maybe the Statue of Liberty buff are probably the worst parts. The Civic Tree is pretty nice overall. And yeah, again, I think I have a lot of positive... I've played as America before in the modern age. I think in my Harriet Tubman Let's Play a long time ago, I played as them, and it did feel very strong. I was going for science in that, but again, because of the adaptability, I was able to go with science pretty easily, and it felt strong. So, all in all, not much to say about America other than extremely adaptable, very strong. Let's close it out here with what I have as the #1 Civ in the modern age, and that is Meiji Japan, which I think is very appropriately #1 on this list. Let's kind of look at why. When you overbuild a building, gain science equal to 50% of the building's production cost, so you're going to get a ton of science passively right there. Another interesting, we'll go top down here. Dogo Onsen, I think, might be a slight knock. The +4 happiness base is kind of meh. You gain population during a celebration in that city, though, which can be nice. But still, Dogo Onsen, probably the worst part of this. Let's look at the units. Crazy units. Heavy naval unit. First time this unit is destroyed, it respawns in the closest settlement you own at 50% HP. That is unbelievable. I mean, I can't believe this unit exists. Anyway, feels extremely strong. 0. Increased range, +4 combat strength against other fighter air units, can intercept enemy air units. So you have crazy good balance from a militaristic perspective between land and sea. No military units that are on land, but I guess I said land and sea. I meant air and sea. So still, really great balance there. From the unique quarter, we get gold and production, 2 things that I always rate very highly. You get +1 gold and production on buildings in adjacent districts, and increases the number of resources that may be assigned to the settlement by 1. Not bad. Again, but just solid. Really solid. Civic Tree, same thing. When you train a naval or aircraft unit, receive science equal to a set percentage of its production cost, which is great. Increased production and science from specialists, which is good because you're going to be growing your city. And, I mean, especially if you do the Dogo Onsen, you're going to be adding population to your cities and giving yourself specialists, etc. You get bonuses to production of military buildings. You get combat strength for aircraft units when attacking an enemy unit engaged by a naval unit. So, excuse me. There's a lot that I like about the Meiji Japan Civ, but I think that overall, this is a Civ that can give you military strength, but also probably the best ability to scale with science in the age. And that, I think, is the main part of it. I forgot, sorry, I've scatterbrained here. I forgot my favorite node of the Civic Tree. It's the Bunmei Kaika Tier 1. Gain a set percentage of production towards military and production buildings. Or actually, wait. I totally just misread that. Oh, no, this is it. when you train a naval or aircraft unit, receive science equal to a set percentage of its production cost. I think I already said that, but I do think as a tradition, that is really, really strong because you're getting science back for scaling militarily, so you can be putting pressure on neighbors while also scaling science, which at least in my playthroughs, whenever you do scale science, the military pressure kind of comes naturally with that, and they go a little bit hand in hand because of what you're doing with the science tree. So this is, I rate it highly because it is adaptable, but the thing that it's good at, no one else really is good at. There's not really another modern age Civ, in my mind, that has this strong of a science presence while also giving you some optionality with militaristic stuff, with gold, with production, etc. So, well-rounded, great ability to scale. The unique ability here gives you a ton of value for overbuilding. And so top to bottom, I think this Civ is the strongest in the age, bar none. So if you're someone looking to play just a good, well-rounded, strong Civ in the modern age, I would play Meiji Japan. But I'll put the tier list on screen here. So this is how I have it all shaking out. Meiji clearly number 1. I think then you have America, Mexico, Qing as A tier, and I think there should be a pretty big gap in my mind between S and A and then the rest of the list. Those top 4 Civs I think are just way stronger than the bottom 8. So even Great Britain and France, part of me wanted to just put them in C tier and leave B tier open. I think that would honestly be pretty fair, but I think all the other Civs do struggle quite a bit. However, this is a tier list. These are just my thoughts. Always curious to hear what you all think of this list, so feel free to let me know in the comments. But yeah, enjoy your modern age games, try out these Civs, let me know how it goes for you. And from our house to yours, we hope you'll join us for one more turn, and we'll see you next Tuesday for our live stream where we'll be giving away a copy of Civ 7. We hope you'll join us, become members of the channel, all that good stuff. But we'll see you all next time.